Hello.
Gena, de Wimbe.
Talo below there no. Run Ryan.
Yanker Sunran.
Love law there no was.
Oh, I think I have to put my sound up. Konda Geshila Anike Ani Cheru Tangore. Okay. Kare Sumpela?
Oh, they were in Beza, or they were in Loni Lola, there no.
So Geshe-la was asked, someone asked Geshe-la how he was, and he said, I'm good, I'm getting better, year by year, better and better.
Yep.
There, Ajan Chegel, so Nero.
Karila Nero?
Ajan Chegel?
Oh.
Yama. Uncle Yama.
He's getting closer and closer to... Yeah, getting closer.
Ajan Chegel?
Ajan Chegel? My mommy brother.
Yeah, so Yama is the Lord of Death. So Geshe-la saying he's getting better and better year by year, but nearer and nearer to meeting Yama.
Hi, Diane. How are you?
Hi, Mark. I'm well. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you.
The Asian job.
Yeah, it's that's kind of this joking thing they say in Asia. We don't so much necessarily joke around like this, but that's a very common way to just kind of joke when someone says how's it going, how are you doing? I'm good, but every day closer and closer to death, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Tanga Salaka Kalasagin.
Yeah. It's so to all Tony Abba Chuzi to together.
Videos again.
Yeah. Sange Chedan Soki Chonam La Chancho Partodan Hogi Jinzo Gibe Tonam Gi Rola Penjera Sangen Roba Sange Chedan Soki Chonam La Chancho Partodan Kapsi Dage Jinzo Gibe Tonam Gi Rola Penjera Sangen Roba Sange Chedan Zogi Chonam La Chanju Pardo Dani Kyasa Dage Jinzo Gibe Sonam Gi Rola Penjere Sange Ndo Barash Samjen Thamje Dewa Tan Devi Gyutan Dembarak Samjen Thamje Dungal Dan Dungal Gi Gyutan Tawarak Samjen Thamje Dungal Mebe Dewa Tan Mindawa Samjen Thamje Nyirin Chadan Nidan Ta Nyamla Nebara Gyurji Samjen Tham Dewa Tan Devi Gyutan Dembara Samjen Thamje Dungal Dan Dungal Gi Gyutan Tawarak Samjen Thamje Dungal Mebe Dewa Tan Mindawarak Samjen Thamje Nyirin Chadan Nidan Ta Nyamla Nebara Gyurji Samjen Tham Dewa Tan Devi Gyutan Dembara Gyurji Samjen Thamje Dungal Gi Gyutan Tawarak Samjen Thamje Dungal Mebe Dewa Tan Mindawarak Samjen Thamje Nyirin Chadan Nidan Ta Nyamla Nebara Gyurji Sajibyo Eji Chuji Mendo idam guru ranamendala kamniyataya.
Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. This ground, spread with incense, adorned with strewn flowers, Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon, I imagine as a Buddha land, and by offering it to you, may all living beings enjoy this pure land. Thus, meeting the teaching of the peerless teacher is due to the spiritual mentor's kindness. I dedicate this virtue for all living beings to be cared for by excellent spiritual friends. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryata Yami.
Kange tujingi zongwa tawa tamje pambe chiri tambe chini tunzebe kodam de la cha cha lo. Ya da. Chingin she chidi gala nyingen yinanda, sheken yinanda, samba chanchu kunlong samba chanchu ki semgi zimba chawade, pe misiba ke chambu chadi yore. Ani nyingen yina, chik one yungi kod kachoye chi tunda kuwade, ani chik nyumung nyimbo nrotuba chita. Sheken yina, bakaraki, kengbada ngaygel dang, tendi dang mandeba chini. Jenla pensim kunilane. Ani chik sangi tembasana midu, tendi yungringbu neya, tendi samadani shewa, pe misiwa kechembore. Ngada kengba keyagi jita korang yomare, chui abuji sosu shiki yomara, te hagu gore, kengba keyagi gitu yom, yu kecheyagi, kengba keyagi jita di yomar tagini. Wata tangana kaan shebade, lasa nambar tabakoni shewa de, pe misiwa kechembu chadi yore, ta tendi jiri.
So here at the beginning, we say a few words about taking up the perfect, authentic motivation. And so whether you are the one that is listening to the Dharma or learning the Dharma, or the one that actually is teaching the Dharma, what is really of utmost importance is to really embrace the altruistic mind, to really embrace bodhicitta. And this is a very, very key point. And so, for example, if you are listening to the class, then you take in what you know, or what the meaning that you have learned from what you are hearing, as a way to apply to your own inner afflictions, your own emotions, in a way to decrease them. And if you are a teacher, then at the outset, that the motivation that one starts with is to be free from any arrogance or pride, and really taking up the attitude of teaching the Dharma from the heart that wishes to benefit others. And so actually, if you are a teacher of the Dharma, and this is leading you, or like teaching a class, if you're teaching a Dharma class or teaching the Dharma, and you're doing so from the attitude of pride or feeling special about it, then actually this shows that you don't really know the Dharma, because the Dharma is not about being proud for doing something, but doing something for the benefit of others. And that is what is an authentic, a perfect and authentic motivation, whether you are the one that is taking in and listening to the teachings, or actually the one that is giving the teaching.
어다 된디갈라 땅아랑서 추도 차디어레 추기 롤링쟁인 추기 즉 갈소레 다 바게 강셰바디 지디지라니 갈소레다 데시게야단 지기 과디 진 데시게야던디 그 추도 차디갈라 겨왕만에 판샤베 아주 레멘 장부지에 터네 도스 좀바레 아니 다 가져 투바데 시바데 녀모 녀몽 펠케스민라 녀몽 마 고는야 녀모 또스 슈충루 땅에라 배준제과데 마랑수 깡갈로서 랭겐 차디어레 들어와 마주 깡가다 녀몽 칭디어레 녀몽 칭말레 돌고거레 데돌나 탈바 톱거레 상기 고방 톱거레 데 마톨나 톱거마레 고바 터도던 가서 상기가 터두와 땡기지데 땡기지는 누마투야게 터두 땡인데가라 미일 갸침보 인데가라 마주 배 가서와 강셰바데 지디지라 즉 데세gem나 하고와 그 톱주와데 뱀미스게 첨부 차대요레 게 최초때 차대요레.
So actually, we all come together as Dharma brothers and sisters. We are friends in the Dharma. We are all Dharma siblings. And this shows that actually we have a common connection, not only now, but we have come together now, it is said, due to our karma and auspicious karma and connections of the past, from past lives. That's why we all come together again now under these auspices of Dharma, as Dharma brothers and sisters. It shows that we have a former karmic connection together. And so that which we learn, this topic of the Dharma, and understanding that this path is a path in that we learn to do some inner work on ourselves, do inner work on the emotions, our emotional states, our defilements, and our negative emotions. We learn about this. And we're learning together as Dharma brothers and sisters, and it's our responsibility to actually take what we learn and work on our own negative emotions, our own afflictions, because if we work on our afflictions, we can be liberated from them. If we can be liberated from our afflictions, then we can attain the state of liberation, attain the state of complete awakening, Buddhahood. And so actually, this needs to be the very foundation of our objective, of our motivation, of our aim, is to be working in a way that we are slowly working in a way that we are becoming liberating. We're liberating ourselves from our own negative emotions. And so not only that, as Dharma brothers and sisters here all together and connected in this way, we also have the responsibility to take what we learn and to help others understand it as well by explaining it to them, by taking that which we know and offering it to others and explaining it to our Dharma brothers and sisters. This is a very, very important part of the path as well.
야, 다 그냥 디지털다 선점 제라동가 봐. 대나니 다 라링 디엘렌도 라링가 봐. 세다 다 니바테 차디요래. 디엘렌게 라링가 봐. 다 니바테 차디요래. 다 때라 그상 이 시고데 빼미스부게 전부죠. 라리 시야 진남시야 카낭세기 시바즈는 직바직냐르도 고와. 라리 카낭세기 시바. खाना खोना चोपे से बान लग रहे खाना थे किसे बान लग रहे यानी जिन्ना मारंग लग रहे रारी लग रहे ताजिक बरे तीसरे को तो पैकेज में तो मतलब यहाँ थैंकी जंबा जिला यहाँ तो कला कोआ मराना यहाँ याबू अमरवा तो सुनगा कोआ चिपटे था.
And so we left off last in our text at the Madhyamakan's refutation of the mind-only school's acceptance of an assertion of mind being self-aware, that mind can know itself. And so the Madhyamakas are refuting that mind can be self-aware or know itself, whether we call it the observing consciousness or the self-knower or the perceiver. These all are the same thing. There are different terms for the same thing. And it's important that we know the different terms, because when we come upon this different nomenclature, we can get caught up if we can't identify what it means. But what this means is the perceiver, this perceiving consciousness. And so what the Madhyamakas have been refuting is that mind can be a perceiver of itself. And so that's where we picked up, or where we left off last.
젠리시야 존남시야 카칠 초비시바 카칠 되기 시바잖아 따직 바래. 대소 양돈 따직 바래.
Generic dang
젠리 존남 카칠 되기 시바.
So also di chikpare di
어때서 돈 따직 바래. 당연히 말하러와. 젠리시야 진남시야 카칠 되기 시바자다 당연히 말하래다 돈 따직 바지냐래.
So again, and I don't have the technical terms in front of me of how this might be. You might find this in the philosophical texts, and Mark certainly jump in if you know them. We can also call it other awareness, or awareness of other, or the that which observes, like that which grasps. These are other ways to point to the same thing. What it means is so there's that which is grasped and that which grasps, and this
Diane?
is all.
I'm sorry, one definition that is given is heterogeneous knower.
Okay.
Also, other hyphen knower.
Mhm. Okay. So there you go. You may come across these in a more technical, thank you, Mark, in the logic texts, in these technical terms. And what it all points to, Geshe-la said, is they're all different terminology, meaning the same thing. The grasper, that which grasps at something else.
와다 디 대화디는 디도 전주 잔들 처면나라 쇼로가 집가 두주 에 락숨데 데가나 지다 니바 셰반딜라 카치츠베 zuwe namba tanga zendo 다 zunam 세야당 카치르초 세야당 아니 젠리 세야데 또 죽바임바다 단디니 도용거다 데도 카치르초 세도 zuwe namba 세도
쉽게 아니
지가 두주라숨
라소
와다 때가는 내베 야카레나 zunam 세데 zuwe namba 되는 도와 다 젠리 디셔바는 nembegiare te genri che bazan zunam de genri che barwa oto tu ta dan doa ha nang corner chobe shipe number ni yola chimala rari unsum impe de sheba thamje mi ba inos rari gi yula sheba madota zunga yul gun meson re sheba kyang res rari gi yula sheba thamje de rari gi yul res ranyong rari jibya tuchurasum
anish di sikang
junjula niba shebandila kachir zungwe nambatang jugude tuchurasum ge petaga 지금 타만이데. shebandila kachir zungwe nambatang zendo. 오다 kachir zungwe nambat digala kachir zungwe nambat sigdo zunamsiya kachil degi shebasiya ani jinamsiya tsuchikbareta jenri gi shebaseta tsuchikbarese karnang chobe sheba namba ta karnang chobe shebata chi zungwe nambata na karnang naltegi shebasigoro rari zetela rari unsum sigres rari unsum impe di sheba tamje mi bainos rari unsum yula sheba mada yo maresi gorda esalvador oda teach
Diane?
Yes.
James Valby, I like what he calls it referential awareness. And Jeffrey Hopkins says it's an other knower which engages external objects other than the perceiver.
Okay, that makes sense. That's helpful. And I'm just catching up to exactly where we are. So now Geshe-la is reading from the commentary. And the commentary that he's reading from is all pertains to verse number 17, is around where we were studying with verse number 17. And so basically what it's speaking about is the perception, our perception of physical environment, how the perception or other observer takes in its objects. And here we are. Okay, I'm just in the greater text of things. So what we have here is a refutation. So we're in the section of this commentary of the refutation that mind can know itself, that mind, this observer, can be a knower of itself. And so that's where we are here. And so it's that which makes contact. It's that which is the consciousness that is that observes something other than itself. And so this is the consciousness that it's talking about. And so whether it can be self-aware, aware of itself. So here what's happening is they're negating self-conception, self-knowing.
Kaya de rari de kagora ni par rari de. Tiwe langi rari nga patera tat naise ki subject sum yongore. Tiwe langi rari nga pas ye dela naise ki subject sumche kare yongore. Dela lungi nga pas rari chomden de lungi zimbe rari nga aya chikche. Ripe nga aya chiche. Rari yobe tuche nga aya sum.
Sumpadi karela?
Rari yobe tuche nga. Rari yobar tugu orwa. Te tuche giri tuche kage ores. Sum te tela lungi nga patang, ripe nga patang, rari yobe tuche nga paas. Sabje sum dere.
And so then next, so again, identifying the object that is being refuted. What is being refuted is a self-knowing mind. And there are the positions by which it will be refuted are threefold. It will be refuted with scriptural citations, with logic, and with refuting refuting the establishment of a self-knowing observer. And so in these three, from these 3 points of view, or from these, by means of these three, self-knowing will be refuted by the Madhyamikans in their answer.
Ta uma thangiru rari yugyo marwa. Rari ndongende senzambadang dodepa nikendo gore. Ta senzamba kayong dodepa tengi katurwa. Tanda senzambadang uma thangiru chobe kabinde senzamba musukatigola dodepa tengi kat kenurwa. Kongusulabgoya yo marte indigala. Ta senzamba rari ndopade ta lunginga pasidigar kare. Chumden degi any be lung your es cannot be lung the Dangal res or that desigore. Tavitsi den dindo. Jidengin and Gombe Gangs and Gombas and Gombos in the Sanki Chumden de Ligugora. Jidengin and Gombe Gang, sem mitonge songs, reading in Ran la Rang, Chitter, Michet, Tejin. In Serzoa, it Susunda. What are they? The Zawatache. Ta Gombe Kabasun re Sudikala Suna Remuchendo. Tan dosum Kaje Devan Dinalan do Chi Tang and in Dinalan do Nin the Tanshadua. It does a package hambore. Tambo Tawa the Gurnang and Ishugungan do de la Jugu Kishegora. Kirangepe. Senzamba kerangi rarin dobade digmindo chomden do dangal dugudus chomden dege enipe semgi sum tongmare sungdo ready so kajon noya ready rangi chela pentogme doas dinagi semgi sem tongmares oda dus sungdo.
Awesome. And so first we look at the scriptural authority here. And when we, the first scriptural authority that is taken up is actually taken from the sutras. And so also this is one that was sent out earlier this week. on Facebook and Slack, and where it says here that the Lord of the world, the Lord of existence, has said, and this is from the Self-Eminent Precious Gem Sutra, where the Buddha said that the edge of a sword is unable to slice itself. And in the same way, one's own mind is unable to perceive itself. And that was a direct quote. So this is a root quote from the sutras. So the root words are taken from the sutras, and then it furthermore then says that, for example, so in another place in the sutras, it says, the teeth of the sword's edge cannot cut into themselves. And in the same way, then consciousness cannot be its own perceiver. Mind cannot be its own perceiver. And so here, who is it that posits self-knowing? That there is a mind that can know itself or be self-aware? Well, this is the mind-only school and also the Sautantrika school. So, but here the Prasangikas, so here in this particular place where we are in the text, again, this is all based on these, the way of the Bodhisattva, the wisdom chapter. This is the Prasangika that are refuting the mind only, but by refuting the mind only's assertion of a self-knowing mind, automatically then the Sautantrika are being refuted as well. There's no reason to do it twice. With that, the Sautantrika's views are refuted as well. And Prasangika is saying here, well, here is something the Buddha directly said, that contradicts your view, mind-only school. The Buddha Shakyamuni said this, that actually the teeth of an edge of a knife are of no use to cut itself, and so is the same way with a mind, with cognition. And so here, two sutras have been used to contradict the mind-only school's assertion.
그런데 켈링이나 그 전된된 도당 가르고 도대 가르래 주나림 붙인도 주나림 붙인도래 레디 소티니지 제퍼 미니바 소 페르자바 심기 심미통 오지송 주나림 붙인도는 뜻송도아 되니 양도 갈때 미바제양 젠라양 심기 진 심팅이 둥두로스다 심기 동마르까지 통이나 딩이 높아타대 차르고 높아타대 잖아 애니베 가르소래 니나누 비수지 또고 말이 니난다 집에 또르고 또 딩미도 숭숭거래 아니 라리다 니나메 비수지 또고 거와 라지지여이나 왔다 딩미도 숭숭거래 아니 도데 랑가르 샤바 Children Radi Rankiso Chupramiche Sormoni said Singwa Maranzo Sormo Labin Zugudira Sormolagora. Oh, Chupramiches Sormoni Rala Repramiche, Sormoran Sormola Tugumaraji, Koran, Tuja Sosu Yomara, Chido, Somosity, or that they lagra. Rari Semgantiginos. The Ranrisi at the same there, and it's Shiba Jignon to Mares, the Jibajikan raise at Sundera, that Lung Ganje, Lung Sum Charuda. What that is a that lungdang gal lungi kaya deta lung sum charu do odatire.
And so furthermore, in the Lankavara Sutra, there is a quote from the Buddha where the Buddha as well really this quote in the sutras is very contrary to the mind only's assertions. And so Prasangika say, well, if you accept that mind is self-knowing, then you are contradicting the words of the Buddha himself, where again, in the preeminent Precious Jewel Sutra, where the Buddha said that the teeth of the sword's edge cannot cut into themselves. And this illustrates that the mind also cannot be self-knowing. And then just as, and also, if it were the case that mind could also take the mind as the object of its observation, that mind becomes two. It splits into a duality. It's a duality. And so similarly, just as a knife cannot cut its own edge and one's tooth cannot bite itself, likewise it is for the notion of a self-knowing mind. And this was said by the Buddha. So actually now with this third, this last quote, then there are actually three citations from the Buddha himself that actually address this point. So are we clear up until this point? Does everything make sense?
Just as clarification, we're saying that when we turn our attention inward and are thinking thoughts or dreaming dreams, that's not the mind that we're perceiving, it's something else?
Dine digeshila. Pena not so gom gyap be kapsu, not so samlo tangi yerpa de, samlo de yang hakoya, di semrang marbe. Semla.
Di tas hakongin ta tembaina temba semjungrowa. Ta page semjungabjungaji nana dumba singin temba singin ani shijin singin dezo ta shijin dige page pu om gedigala midegan demdu jarachingin shijin chadiyorwa. The semgi chashichirwa. Tandadi rari siade sem kona yulla sem yang sem genji ta yulchene sem genji ki toba kachishi gorwa.
Dine rang rik.
Oh, rang rik zide.
Yerpe kapsu.
Oh.
Dine di semki shenla.
Ta semgi ta Kurang Karsore Rari Sidula Semgi Sem Yulche Sungorwa.
Oh, lasso. Dine Gomgya pe kapsu natso pena samlo dang nyomong gikorla hako. Inadi sem rangi mare.
Dida Sem Gida Rede Sem Karsore Yuldijibe Kachita Marwa. Ku Karadan Semti Nendu Midu Tagor Stangende Semjung Chagora Charaching the Semjung Redoa. Anytime that Zumin the Tembarendoa.
Lasso dine Gomgya pe kapsu or Kaduyana and Tanda gyula dene det ani truk yore pena di shedang yore. Kanda ngala shedang ke ye hakoken sure.
하고겐 다
Dekapsu.
대값도 잘했정인데 시즌으로 와. 시장 겐두 미도 타겠네 시즌 상.
So.
어따티 아니 이거 둘이 중간데 템바르다 배 이제 맞추건데 템바르 시즌이 또 자고래.
Hola, so. So there is a little bit of a difference here. So there is a difference. So when we're talking about, so there's the term rang rik, mind as a self-knower. Then this is mind knowing mind itself. When, for example, you're either meditating or just in, in a situation and you notice, for example, what's happening in your mind, your thoughts, maybe you have angry thoughts or hateful thoughts. So I asked Geshe-la, what is the seer then? So this is not main mind. So we have main mind and we have mental events, things like mentations. And so actually the knower at this time is mindful awareness, which is not main mind, knowing that one has become angry or has hateful thoughts in their minds at that time. This is actually vigilant awareness or mindful awareness that is aware. It is not mind itself. It is not what we're calling when we're speaking about rangrik or a self-knowing mind. This is not that. This is mindful awareness, being aware that there is anger arising. So there is a difference. Did that help, William?
랭음부지로와 배나 다 디레다 인규라다
So
실고 따마지 올라 랭음부잖아 가르쳐 그래.
then
이그람 실고는 철그로와. 철그래 철그 말해.
Chagre.
문베란다데 실고를 줄도 여기 열어와. 실고는 차디오다라 때 실고 코나는 여기서지 통구도. 다다디
Dikariki pere Geshe-la.
간제 짐벤 남반 진남세야 되기 베 던지지 자거다.
So Geshe-la is giving an example here that I'm trying to unpack. And the example is if you have a piece of blue cloth and you place it under a clear crystal, what are you going to see in the crystal? You'll see blue color. So that's as far as we've gotten so far. And I'm trying to equate that with something. I'm trying to, unless someone else already has that. Ani Geshe-la kiranki pe di serpudo di shell di rengumpo di shelgi ogla ani shagna
자나 운보디 철거래.
really
그 맞아나 또 철거 말와.
di serpudo yena di kare la jagore pedi
베데타 진남세야데 다 sentam pejaade tendijile jagoran zimbe nambaaside ta namba tele ta ranam dang zunam ta namba de ri mangpo jare yata ta tandadi namba yulgi namba chardul disungorwa.
So this is being compared to the mind only point of view. Whereas Geshe-la said, so if you put the blue cloth under, you'll see blue. If you don't, you will not. Tene re ngompo yuna? Tene ngompo
Yuna?
shagare?
Yuna 다 그 실고 한다는 공부 차고래. 이 랭공부도 맨날 실고 한다는데 공부 차고 땡코나 요 말아.
Re
저
re.
넘버 다남 존이 지르다. 다남 존 텐디질라 자고 왔다.
Disropodo. So, lasso di disropodo.
다 간지 탄규르즈도 라리 생데 셰바치기 유레 셰바체데 디기 민두 쫀데 노당 갈기두 세데 가거래. 타요네 카야더룽 리베 카야들라 드룽 오니 살루두레.
Oh, lasso.
살루도 가버래. 단다디 룽기 까거라. 룽데당 갈루도 쫀데 룽데당 갈루도 간지 단다가서 pena rari dijje bayina yulde gar sorta rari ki sheba jin yonde gala ani pe Nina nubi sulgi togure, te nina nubi sulgi togu mindu sigi sungorwa. Doba tate chabayina, ani nina de jeba charugudo, te indi tegi mindu sigi jig sungdoa.
Okay.
Ta doba sidi gala, doba tate mepe jidu kelingo besi, doba sidi ta 또 생각해요래. 유르드구에 간데서 고고나 하고 민도다. 분별도봐 분별도봐라. 분바다 타도 분별도봐 저잖아. 분바마다 자야요 말에. 다 유나 마자이나 또 가버래. 삼는 주야 또 가버래. 분별도봐 저잖아. 분바마다 자야요 말은 원진께서 분바마다 요 말에. 분별도봐 따바 인라거래. Umbata bammarwa dello tuya kabor tal riba majang kenjila
Lasso.
tin digalata dopa se digalata kaje shede tananga so mangje juno majang inda te thomro jma to phenta yung sa mara sangdo.
So, basically what Prasangika are saying is there cannot be, this is not a subject-object duality experience. It can't be that something is the subject and the object at the same point, at the same time. And if something is a subject and object, so mind knowing itself, then it has divided. It becomes dualistic. And this actually makes no logical sense that something, that if it's knowing itself, actually it's one thing knowing other, not one thing knowing itself, and it has become dualistic. So this doesn't make sense. Not only does it not make logical sense, it's contradictory to what the Buddha taught. And now Geshe-la said the next thing that he said to me, he said probably would be very difficult, if, very, very unlikely to be able to translate. First of all, it's very difficult to translate in this, and if someone hasn't really studied logic in depth, these terms, it won't work. So, and this is about observing in an object, like something about its underlying purity. So there's a word here, and so Mark is probably still on the line, and I looked it up in the logic text, and even in the English when I read it, it made no sense. Tokpa. So and Geshe-la said there's probably no English translation for it. And the English translation I did find for this made everything even more confusing. And Geshe-la said, because this is all so confusing, it probably doesn't even make sense to talk about it. This particular in-depth, what he wanted to say from the point of logic, very, very difficult. So he said probably better not even to get into.
톰로지리 발전.
라.
장대긴지나 리바 장대긴지나 다고 하고로와.
Yeah.
리방아도 또 만세데 징이 중 리비 중라 마장 인자 또스 톰로리. 다 분빌도 봐줘 라게나 분발에 주르도 자야 엄마래. 분빌도 봐 따바 인라고래. 염쳐보지 알았디라. 다티 또스 톰로리 톰 주나 뜰경 가래.
Very confusing, Geshe-la said. Not confusing for people who've studied logic in depth, but as most of us assembled have not, it would be it would be more confusing than anything else, these logical statements.
다 지단이 다 자셔.
So William, do you have anything further before we move on?
I'll just put a pin in that.
Okay.
Yes, but no.
Ready kazo ready kazo nomboina rang micheba na jinjigi sheba kazo ji selwaina shebarang sel tu mare yulche tu mare ze sungade tondate ngomade terita.
So basically summing it all up, no matter how sharp those teeth on the edge of a knife are, that does no good for cutting itself. And no matter how clear mind is, how clear knowing awareness is, it does it no good to illuminate or become aware of itself. Basically, it all comes down to that. And so I'll just make sure that I translated clear to William what Geshe-la said to me, is that it's a different situation when we are aware of our thoughts and what's happening within, like, within the mind stream, what the mind is doing, because it's actually not mind that is aware of that. It's awareness that is aware of that. So it's a different situation.
Hey, Diane.
Yes.
Something I'd like to contribute this. This might help a little bit from. So I took a Buddhist logic class like 17 years ago, and I'm trying to remember. So I found in my notes when it says the logic school believes in apperception, but the Madhyamaka school says that you can't be perceiving an object at the same time that you're perceiving yourself. So basically it's saying that you can't, if you imagine the mind and the awareness, the crosshairs, which would be the focus, can't go back. They can only go back and forth. You can't focus on the object and the perceiver of the object at the same time. You're either looking at the perceiver or you're looking at the object. Does that make sense? So like if I'm looking at the bottle that's to my right and the bottle that's to my left, no matter how far back I step, even though it seems like I have them both in my field of view, I still have two bottles. So my eye has to either move to the left or to the right. So it's the same thing here, that the awareness is either to the self or to the object. It cannot be both.
That statement makes sense to me.
So they say that the mind cannot simultaneously hold two different objects.
Okay, I wonder though, is that the same question as the mind taking itself as an object? Is that the same?
That's the Madhyamaka's position. not the Prasangika's position, because the mind only would say that you can perceive mind, because if everything is a projection of mind, then what you're looking at is mind itself. So like when I look at the tree, I'm actually looking at my mind.
So this statement actually really undermines mind only in its entirety.
Yes. Yeah.
It really does undo it. I see why they're doing it, because you can't.
At this point, it seems like we're splitting hairs, but those hair splittings are important for seeing emptiness, for being able to get out of the self and into the object.
Because the self that they're talking about is a kind of an object.
Yeah. And it's kind of also, it's another illusion that we're trying to see through.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, but I still am like, where's the imagery? Where's all that coming from? But I get,
Mark,
I think I get the point.
your camera is upside down, Mark.
So, hello. It's because I have my laptop is a part tablet, and for me to sit it here, I have to turn it to tablet mode. And for some reason, my camera doesn't turn upside down. So,
all right. All right.
How are you?
Yeah. All right. Geshe-la, Nha La Chu Wa Shi Yu. So when you're talking about Topa, are you talking about Topa as Kapana in Sanskrit? Or are you talking about Topa as Vitaka in Sanskrit?
So do you know the Tibetan or English equivalents of those words? Because I don't know the Sanskrit.
Okay, because Topa as Kapana in Sanskrit means conceptual consciousness.
No.
Okay,
no.
Topa as
Different word, Angela. Different.
As,
Angela, different word. Geshe-la just said different word.
Okay. And
Not the same.
Topa is,
You're hearing
Vitaka.
Topa. You're hearing Topa in differently. There's a subtle difference between the T and the D sound that they're making.
Dokpa. It's like you would spell it Dokpa, Dokpa.
Which is different.
And yeah, I've been looking for it. I do have a logic text where I printed it out and looked at the logical points and statements using Dokpa, and I can tell you it didn't make it clearer for me. Really? No, it was a very scientific word. I'll try to look for that. As you can imagine, I've got papers and copies of things everywhere. This one, it's beautifully written, but I looked at it and I know English and I was just shaking my head.
What is the word? What is the word translated as?
I don't remember.
Oh.
I cannot remember. It was I think it was a scientific term of something that they might use in chemistry or something, as I recall. I'll have to look for it. But even so, we'd have to know what Geshe-la is talking about with Dokpa. But actually, the statement that he just made is the exact statement I have. It is about the Bumpa, which is just a vessel. Tibetan logic often will just use a vessel, a pot. I'll try to find it. And if anyone can make sense of it, and help us all out, just like Geshe-la said at the outset of the teachings, that's what we're all here. We're here for each other. So certainly would appreciate that.
Can we revisit the metaphor he was using about the blue cloth for just a second?
Mm-hmm.
Because I was feeling like I knew where he was going with that. Like the cloth doesn't belong to the crystal, right? It transmits the color.
Yes, and he did say that his meaning for that is going to become more clear in a moment.
Okay.
But I will ask him, Geshe-la, the shell dang rengumpo gi pe di korla yang chick delay ani shanda ani sungronang dekola.
Ati number shartul dere ingurada number shartul dele pere chago
La.
number yulji number shartul jorowa
Yeah.
del pe chago monichena
So what the
다 단다데 도바단 대화 용금도 맞아 도바다 수디가 니디 그런가 당겨도 니
lesson Lepsong, Jorsong. Okay, so Geshe-la sent it to me. So actually I had taken a picture of the text that I had found back a couple of months ago and sent it to Geshe-la saying, is this what you're talking about? So here it is. And I will read it to you. La.
Dinal dobalena rando jildo tondo tal dobalena mambu cheyore dopa sidigala pe karjana pumbil doba jozana pumba mata jayo mare pumbil doba de tapa in lagore tin digala tai min lepaturo jire riba machangam pe gothum gre
Hola. So here it is. So the translation of this word dokpa is an isolate. And there are different kinds of isolates. There's a general isolate, a self-isolate, a meaning isolate, and an illustration isolate. And so to posit the isolate of a thing, so for example, the isolate of a vessel or a pot is permanent. That's the statement.
Ata pumbi tondo jozana to dirwa jagore
Di tondo.
oh tondo
Mhm.
ta jido sergi pumba jana ndigore
Di gonda ke Geshe-la di bumpa di ani takpa re
pumba tapare lago mata
kare sungpe.
pumba tapare lagore
Oh, re. Okay.
pumbil doba tapare pumbil doba jozana pumba mata jayo
Okay.
inge balon go to inge gayore
Lasso, dene karegi dokpa, de pegi
doba
dun dokpa?
doba dele yena jiore raldo tondo jildo zerde
Okay.
jildo zerde yore
Okay. So that's the statement is the isolate of a pot is permanent. Not the pot, but it's the isolate of the pot, which is permanent. And again, there are self-isolate and general isolates of the pot, and they're mutually inclusive.
So Diane, I'm sorry, that sounds just a little bit different than I'm reading Jeffrey Hopkins' translation of self-isolate, and he says that it's referring to just the object itself, meaning pot, and not any of the illustrations such as copper pot or its definition. And it sounded like you said permanent, which sounds like a feature.
The Geshe-la statement is the isolate of a pot is permanent. Marepe Geshe-la.
doba tapare pumbil doba ina doba inse de tapare lagore pumbil doba tapare pumbil doba jozana pumba mata jayo mare pumbil doba singi karde pumba la thadil doba chele gore tingo nyopor pe nyopor
Okay, he's saying it's getting very confusing, isn't it? But you heard Mark, what he's saying is the
Yeah.
isolate of a pot is permanent.
Oh, wait a minute. The isolate is permanent. Is he saying the isolate is permanent? Or is he saying the isolate is the permanence of the pot? Because that's a different thing.
He's saying it's permanent.
Oh,
pumbil doba tapare pumbil doba jozana pumbil doba karja gorezana pumba mata jayo mare
Because what do we, when we talk about an isolate of a vessel, we're just talking about a vessel. We're not talking about other things at that time. We're just talking about the isolate of a vessel.
that makes sense.
Tati indigala kanji ta shepa zimba ina tingil doba thate me bichi charudu lagor das tanjure doba thade me bichi charu doba thade me bichi chaba ina kare kendu gda any
Dopatade me pachik.
doba thade kyang me bichi doba thade me bichi doba thade me ba charu dos doba thade me ba chaba ina ta doba ji cha son ro di na any nina the chibe di doba thade me bichi chaba ina ta rari se de rang ri se de yong mi du sung go ta rija
Okay.
thade me ba charu go ra
Mhm. Okay, so why are we here talking about this? We're here talking about it because there is a logical statement that is made that is the proof that if that statement were true, Rangi, if that statement were true, then one's own awareness could not be aware of itself. It would not come about. And so there is this statement about the pot. If the mind that observes the pot, the isolate of the pot, which is different and separate, or as
rija de ta pe thade me gan charu chi charu do la go teni chi chaba in ta rari rija de yul de yuljen che mi do asi go
Yeah, so that if one, like if the self-isolate is seen as something different, then what we have is two different things, that like a dualism, a subject that is observing something other than itself. And that just shows that, and that's a proof as to awareness being unable to be aware of itself. That proves that cannot come about. And so that's where this statement regarding self-isolates, isolates of a thing, come about.
So obviously what he's talking about then is on a conventional level, the mind that's looking at the pot, the Rangdok is recognizing that the pot is not reflecting back, recognizing the observer. In other words, there's a self-contradistinction between the conventional subject and the conventional object. And I think I want to say, I'm bringing the term conventional to mind because we are talking about emptiness so much that I've been sitting here, and I'm not sure if anyone else has, trying to figure out where the emptiness pops in, but it's actually not part of this discussion yet.
No, it is not.
di tanye dos ta di dos khabor da dere ingu rangdo sidu rangdo jido tondo shayad din jagir da ina go to ya linga yare
Yeah, so Geshe-la said what's tough here is this terminology. What is it when they posit a self-isolate of a thing, a general isolate of a thing, a meaning isolate of a thing? And then to apply it to the logical statements, if we don't understand first that terminology, doesn't help us get closer. So I guess, I will ask, is there anyone else who, I have isolate, I have this word isolate, self-isolate, general isolate. Is there another English word that could be used to make it clearer that anyone else could recommend or that knows what this might be getting at?
Bob Thurman says categorical differential.
Categorical differential. For which one? Isolate?
Self-isolate.
Self-isolate.
So it seems to be it's a differentiator. Ask Geshe-la this for me, if you would. Is this something in the perceptual process just before a dunchi is before we have a dunchi?
What, the self-isolate?
Yeah. Does it play any part of that?
Dine
둔치
rang
디 카가래 라도 둔치 카가래 둔치 시디가라 최대 많이 진데 최대 찔트로는 쪼다게 찾을래 둔치 시거라 찌 많이 다 된다고 그러지 에 샘기 똑베 쪼다샤 겨지로와.
No, they're different because actually what's meant by the term that you offered, which is sometimes translated as a generic impression, is that you're getting a replica, a mental image of something, but not the thing itself, but it looks just like the thing. It's it's an image of the thing, but it's not the thing itself. It appears exactly as the same, but it's a mental image of something. So for example, if you were to, think, and I'm adding this example, the candle that's on my kitchen table, if you start to think about that right now, you can get a mental image of it, but it's not the candle itself, but the image that comes to your mind of a candle or a car or bicycle. Those are called dunshis, or general like mental impressions. But Geshe-la said, no, they're not related, not the same as these dope.
Oh, no, I didn't mean if they were the same. I meant in the process of having the perception, does that have to precede the dunchi?
Dene dunchi masha ngunla dene rangdok chik shar gerya yana.
간디세.
So like, does the general isolate of a thing, or does it appear in your mind?
I guess I'm trying to see its functionality is where we're at is I know that I'm in this ballpark and I'm also in this haze just like all the rest of us, but I feel like this is something that has to be some kind of, maybe it's a quality of the mind itself before having the dunchi.
Dene dokpa sena dokpa dan dunchi.
둔치 카가래.
Dralwa kangyang
베드 카가래.
dralwa yana.
저요 말때.
No, there's no
All right.
relation between them.
Then what's its purpose?
둔치서도 또비 일지로와. 높아 세디가라 바기 최대 다들 또비 찾으러 높아 세고라.
Mhm.
An isolate is the essential substance of a
높아
thing.
배나 나인다 다들 또비 최대는 나인을 높아래. 마다 다들 또비 최대는 마게 높아래. 마게 높아서는 마마도 자예요 말에. 마게 높아 따바인 라고. 다들 마인바 다들 도스데 다들 마인바 라고라.
So
다들 마인 비추에 라고라.
Geshe-la is pointing out within this word isolate is that it's very specific to a particular item. Like a pot's isolate is not going to be the same as something else's isolate. The isolate of me, he used my name, of Diane, is just an isolate of Diane. And Mark, the isolate of Mark, is not the same as the isolate of Diane. And actually, there is no other isolate at all that is the same as the isolate of Mark.
So this is a quality in the object, not the perceiver.
Yeah, it's the physical quality, isn't it? Is he talking about physical matter?
I think so.
You packet 최대 많이 준데 최대 다 똑발아 잡아로 또 둔지데 뭐 또빙을 기거마다 왕비를 요마와 시비율 toba ishi gi yulchadyor. Tape chud mayin jidu chud til tabur toda shajila tunji sigore. Pena kansa ka karsa bumbam pena tunji de tobi yulchargura. Chud mayin jidu chud daboda jidu pena Arizona dogen jidu tanda semna Arizona dabo semla lang shere yungdo. Di tunjiri.
So, Dene Dokpa, Arizona ki Dokpa.
Arizona mata jaya mare. Arizona kana ja orta.
Oh, so.
Di thakadore doa. Chigi
Really?
chidi yulgi karso orta. Kechu zamasan kechu zori jirita. Tendi chabare.
No, so. Okay, so when we're talking about this word dunshi, which is a mental impression, a generic mental impression of something. So yes, we are talking about the objects. However, when there is a generic impression, this isn't something where the sense sources, it is not a sensorial perception, it is a mental perception. This is something that happens at the mental level. If, for example, you've been to Arizona in the past and, you know, someone says to you Arizona, or you think about Arizona, you are going to have a dunshi, a mental impression about Arizona because you've been there.
Kiran semla rabodi charingudo.
Yeah, and so the same, you know, the landscape, you know, say, you know, you're thinking about a particular landscape, and that will exactly like that. It's going to appear in your mind. And so that's a mental process. So I asked Geshe-la, okay, well then what is Arizona's Dokpa? You know, what is its isolate? And he said, well, it's exclusive to itself. And it only its Dokpa only relates to Arizona, and it has its own Dokpa.
So realistically, in English, we would just say the identity. Because when I talk about Diane has a specific identity that is different than William Matthews.
I don't think so though. I think that this includes like the physical material.
Yeah, all the, I mean, in a general way, we would say the identity or the entity.
Like,
Let me ask if it's shall I ask for you, William?
Okay, sorry.
yeah, please. I think I think when they say isolate, it suggests a physical quality.
And also, by the way, when I did ask about that Dokpa for Arizona, it's it is a quality, and you know, he did use the word, it's a feature. It's actually a feature that is only applies to Arizona. Then Dokpa sena di dotok chirgi korla pena lakpa ne tuk ki chir rebe yamena kare yanayang dokpa yore. Dultrum yerpe gi chir.
Kandise dulten yubi yuna tapa in lag marwa. Ta ko doba sidigala ta ko rabu karzo. Ko tade main genji chujila doba lag doba ze tapar mado ko pe yengi tende chusha gade marwa. Tapa in lag orwa. Doba tapa in rogor jozna pumbale zurdu kosa janda jaya yomar pumbe doba inanda che kanda kaina te.
Lasso
Yota sabor tos.
Lasso pena ani kapar di lapa ne ani tuk ki orwa.
Re.
Ani dene lapa ne matupe chir ki korla dela yang dokpa yuna pena shedang la dokpa yuna.
Jedang doba jozna jedang jagirwa. Til dal yomarwa. 지단도 너버야 돼요. 그리고 다들 너버 주여로.
Okay.
지금
Yeah.
까리나 너버도 주 탐지길나 자두고래 자지 자야.
Okay. No, you can take this term and apply it to anything. Absolutely, to something that is tangible and material. I asked about my phone, and he said, absolutely. Phone has has an isolate. And I said, well, what about anger or hatred? Something that we can't, that's intangible. And he said, absolutely. It has a dokpa and it has, I don't even know the words to use around it correctly. It consists of it. Everything has an isolate.
So I think there's a French word, there's a French term that applies here. It's the je ne sais quoi. It's the mojo. Berzin says in the Gelugpa tradition, it's a synonym for a conceptually isolated item, namely one that distinguishes a specific phenomenon in and of itself.
All
So
right,
it's the mojo of something.
I think conceptually, can you say that again?
Conceptually isolated item, namely one that distinguishes a specific phenomenon in and of itself.
Okay.
So it's the mojo of your phone, the mojo of Mark, the mojo of Diane. It's the je ne sais quoi. That's the reason why it's so hard to come up with a word for it, because we have to turn to other languages to even reflect on it. We don't have it in English.
So one thing that I personally have gotten out of what Geshe-la has said is that it is a distinguishing factor or distinguisher of specifying a phenomena in and of itself. That's why the Bumpa's Dokpa could never be applied to anything else. So
Exactly. I think that's exactly right. The right. So if you had two Bumpas in front of you, even though they look absolutely identical, the Bumpa of the right is just a little bit different than the Bumpa on the left.
Mm-hmm. And the Dokpa di ani takpare.
tabaré, doba taba, bumbil doba ina me makabla warta ngoni jina.
Yeah, and I just affirmed that dokpa, that thing, that itness is permanent.
I think the word is unchanging, because permanent, if you destroy the Bumpa, you're not going to have the Dokpa of the Bumpa remaining. So it's an unchanging thing.
Dene dela ani kebariona magyar kenchik yamana ani takpa. Takpare magyar ware.
taba ina yuro me baji gogora, bumbil doba, bumbal sadel doba chela gor, chedel, bumbil doba la, karsore. Taba ina, taba la renga taba yorwa. Renga taba yore. Ring pena kampenam kal da buina kamba zokir gide kampenam kan giron gurwa mangiro sam mareta yam sampurje te so tanye kala
Kare ani yagare ani kongi ani samlola dene takpar lapna digimare magyarwa re yagare.
na chida thade gawa dan dewa toda ge chhe kaji na randon taba in la bore ko ina taba inguru zeno ko ina ti doba ina taba inguru zeno ingu mare la gore ti khebre mangpute chigi thanye gita thanye chetsam de hamako na khabo are tendi jire thanye tapage ripe thul jiro ate hago gore ta ti mazo ripe gana majang ina te gothomro rez lavia de tere etegini.
All right, so I was just asking Geshe-la, is it better to say unchanging, better to say permanent? He said actually in the definition of this, the word permanent is used. However, permanent can have subtle nuances too. And actually the situation that you're talking about can have subtle nuances that will make it different whether you're saying unchanging or permanent, but and so permanence even holds different nuances in different contexts. But in this case, he did say that the permanent is the word that he's using, that Geshe-la is using.
So then it's something separate from the object. So Kechikma Mayimpa Rebe.
Bumba
Dine bumpe dopa di bumpa rang mare di pena di kechu chik.
Bumbidopa Pumba in Lagumara.
No.
Bumbidopa Pumba in Lavina, Bumbidopa Tapa Maimba Chadora. Bumbidopa Tapa in the Laway Mido, Bumbidopa Pumba Mare.
No, it is definitely
Pumba Jagore.
it is definitely different than the bumpa, because if you were saying this isolate is the bumpa, then it would be impermanent, because we know the bumpa is impermanent. And so it's absolutely not what's being said, that that they're like one and the same, synonymous. It's a feature of, or it can be, it has this as an attribute or a feature, but it is not the bumpa.
Right. Kechikma Mayimpa Rebe.
Bumbidopa.
Bumbidopa Kechikma Mayimpa Rebe.
Tetarwa, Taparwa.
Kechikma Mayimpa.
Oh.
Yeah, then that's okay. I know I'm splitting hairs here, but this is a big fight that I've had with myself and other people about the difference between the way we use the word permanent and unchanging in English. And I know that it's subtle and differences and whatever, but for example, the sun is a permanent structure. Every human that has ever existed, every creature with consciousness that's crawled on the earth has seen the same sun. So it's a quote unquote permanent structure for our planet, we hope, but it is changing. The process of change is what keeps the sun burning and shining. So the definitions that are used between Takpa and Mitakpa, which is Kechikpa and Kechikpa Mayimpa, imply that that's more necessary. It doesn't change because it's associated with the bumpa. But if there is no bumpa, there is no dopa. So this is an argument some people have with emptiness. If the emptiness of the bumpa, if the bumpa doesn't exist, does that emptiness then go out somewhere else? And some people believe that's the case. And His Holiness has said emphatically, no, I can pull that out of a book. So the dokpa, I think, is as a characteristic, it's an unchanging characteristic, but it is only associated with the bumpa. And if there is no bumpa, it does not somehow hover where a bumpa used to be.
All right, can you just explain? So first of all, I know that the terms Mark is using, Kechikma, Mayimpa, are like momentary or not momentary. Momentary infers changing, something that changes moment to moment. And the other is something that doesn't change moment to moment. So what then would be the main difference between calling it permanent or unchanging?
Because there are things that are permanent that change. There are also things that are impermanent that don't change. For example, emptiness does not change, but it's impermanent because the emptiness of my paper plate disappears when the paper plate is burned to a crisp. So the emptiness is not changing, but it is impermanent. And the sun, for example, is a permanent structure for us, but it is changing moment by moment. And when you get down to these Kechikma, these instant by instances, these tiny little details are the things that really prove past and future lives and prove this whole process going on.
Okay, so the sun is both permanent and changing. It's considered permanent.
Yes, and right. Emptiness is unchanging but impermanent. And this is going to be a doozy to explain that one, because there isn't a. I mean, what would you use? Talk to Yupa. I mean, I'm looking at it from the position of the definitions that are applied here, and then looking at the English definitions that we're applying. Mm-hmm. So if we're saying that, and this is something that because of emptiness is an impermanent thing, but it's unchanging. So the bottle, like if I have, let me turn on my this bottle is changing, but the bottle is empty. That's probably more confusing. This, the flashlight, is solid. Okay, it's changing, and the emptiness of it is not changing. But when there's no flashlight, when we destroy the flashlight, the emptiness of the flashlight goes with it.
That all makes sense. That makes sense. Ani geshala ani dekorla session nangloche. Ani ne ke chikme chur ke chikme takpa yempe chur kare yore.
Tapa imbichwe.
Di kongi o dine takpe chur kashe yang ke chikme chur yang re. Hana nima. Oh, lasso. Okay. Oh, lasso. Yeah.
Number thamje tapa the renga tapa ni jagore. Renga tapa the kejima in lago marta. Are tong chujin the match hadugala pena pumbas and namka kampa lapsan tagi kampa. Kampe namkate takbarawa. Kampen and Sonsang Joroa. Kampa and Girotan, Sonsang and Giron Dugur and Dugumare.
Kare, Kampa Yama Namka.
Kampala, Kampa, the Kampen Namkas and a Kampen and Sonsang Derwa.
Lasso, Sisopoto.
Oh, Terwa. Kampa and Giroche, the Che Girotansana, the Sonsang and Giron Dugudwa.
That's Girwa.
Girwa.
Really, that's Girwa.
Oh, then over there, Kampe Namkadan. Pumbe namkate so pumbe na chukang ina chu cheka luna songsang de chung ru so renga ve tapa in labre renga ve tapa sam gaya ke tapa timita ba in lagi omare
okay
the thena khong ga ndu ya inza renga ve tapa labre
okay
timita ba in lagi omarda timita ba in lagi omare
okay all right I'll I was a little bit confused by how something could be both momentary or like changing minute by minute and permanent at the same time, like the example of the sun. That was a little confusing to me. So I asked for clarification on how something that was changing could be permanent. And Geshe-la said, no, it can't. And it's not said like that. And we can go back, Mark, if you want to, ask more or offer more, but Geshe-la said no.
I understand. I understand where this problem comes from because I've had this problem with Tenem before, and I've had this problem with other translators. It's because those that speak Tibetan have relied upon the terms permanent and impermanent so much that getting them to separate the two is impossible. Is the sun going to be around for all of our lives? Therefore, in English language, that's a permanent object. That's a permanent structure. Okay. Whenever we talk about something that is permanent, it has with it the connotation of eternity. Okay. And for us, that duration, the entire duration is a permanent structure. So I'm going to use quotes around that loosely. But when we talk about something being impermanent in English, that could apply then to the sun, as long as we are beings that live billions upon billions of years and can see that impermanence. But the definitions of Takpa and Mitakpa, which is changing and unchanging, do not have that same connotation. And this has caused, for me, it's caused a great bit of consternation whenever we come into this topic, because I don't think that those words sum up the essence of like the definitions in Tibetan. Takpa, which means unchanging, is Kechikma Mayimpa. It means it does not exist millisecond by millisecond. And a Mitakpa is Kechikma. It exists millisecond by millisecond. It changes in every single millisecond. We can see that in electron microscope. It's never the same thing twice. So that's where my question is. If we're going to say that the Dokpa is something that's permanent, and so here's the plastic bottle that is going to probably melt and become something else one day. The Dokpa of the plastic bottle is eternal. And the plastic bottle is not eternal. So I don't know how to wrap my mind around that answer because it defies.
That's just, I like that question. I'd like to put to the side because I think it's a separate question. So I'm gonna,
Sure.
so could you definitely earmark that for me? I want to get back to what Geshe-la continued to say
Okay.
about this. And this was, my understanding. So I was clarifying, my understanding is that if something is momentary or changing minute by minute, it could not be permanent. And so therefore, can something that is changing minute to minute be permanent? Geshe-la said no, that it can't. However, something that is permanent, so there's two different things to think about. There is something permanent that will have some change to it, though, however. For example, and one, yeah. And so then there's two different kinds of permanence, these like two terms, and I'll get the actual terms and get them out to you, but let me explain what this one permanence, this is really an unchanging thing, something that doesn't change. However, there's something else that is permanent, but some change happens. For example, if you take the inside of a house or a building, the space that's inside that house is in a certain like shape or way or form because of the structures of that house, the walls, the ceiling, the floors. If the house is destroyed, the space within that house changes a little bit because those factors are gone, the walls, the floor, the ceiling. So it has changed a little bit, but it's still permanent space. It's still, the space is permanent, but there has been some change to it. And let's say you have an empty vessel and there's air or space inside the vessel. That, although space is an unchanging, is a permanent thing, when you pour something in the vessel, does the space that's inside the vessel stay the same shape or does it change? It changes. And so that's that second category of like a permanent. Yeah, injike langa di kola srapomando.
Tangi jargo mare, Pogela.
Oh, la so.
Tangi jargo mare.
La so.
Renga. Mita bazilla go martela.
Okay.
Renga. Something gandoya.
So it's something that sometimes like sometimes ceasing. So I don't have the actual like logic terminology, but what we have to understand about these two kinds of permanence that Geshe-la is bringing up now, they are not related to Kechek Madang and Kechek Mamayemba, meaning momentary and not momentary, or changing and not changing. They're different. They're not related. They're different terms. And what they mean is sometimes ceasing. It's permanence that sometimes ceases, and like unceasing permanence thing. So there are things that are permanent, but sometimes cease. So hopefully that example of the pot and the house helped us see how something permanent can change form a little bit.
That Durani Tambo Labian Tagaran Lagre, Namba Tamjib Tabe, Sinjidala, Namka Thomsan the Jagroa, and it Renga Tabe Sinjidala, Bumpenam Kata, Kampenam Kajagre. The Karza Kampa the Pumba, Nalo Pumbi, Pumbenalo Chukan, then they came the Tayina, Thomsan the Languando Guara. Thomsan and Gruando the Thomsan the Jeep Kachigo Mare, Kajikin Jeep Kachigo Mare. Who can the tenor? Ko Kosa Jengi, Ko Kosa the Kai, Thomson Kosa the Kai on the Gala, Kongando Guara. Diggity.
So let's take example again using space as as the example of these two different forms of a permanent, something that is permanent and always staying, and something that is permanent but sometimes ceases. So just generally, wide open space, the space of the sky could be in that first category, whereas the space that is inside of a house or inside of a vessel. If you build something new in the house or add something to the house, the space changes in the house. And if you add or take away something from your pitcher of water, if you add water or pour water, the space inside of the pitcher changes. But it's not the same kind of change that we talk about with Kechik Mamayimba, something that is either changing or not changing, because the actual space didn't like momentarily change. Like it's not something that's disintegrating, something that is going through that molecular like change, minute by minute, nanosecond by nanosecond, change of degradation, the way phenomena generally do. This change came from adding water or dumping out water. So it's a very different kind of permanence that is not related to changing and unchanging in the same way.
Yeah, that. Oh, that's the opposite.
So maybe we take a little break. We're already at about 5 o'clock.
단단 도숨드마다 라리 까야건 도숨당 갈르고도 때켈레네 디미도스레 다 라리 켈레네 디미도 노스 좀된데 노당 갈르고도 다 텔랍 거라 인규란다.
And summing up what we've gotten through in commentary on the text is how the middle way, how Madhyamaka is refuting a self-knowing awareness and refuting it through 3 scriptural quotes and saying, if you are positing and accepting awareness that is self-aware, then this is contrary to the words of the Buddha himself. Tanda ani konsen? So we can take a little break at this point, everyone.
Found it. So Diane, oh, you can't hear me. So Diane,
Yes.
before everyone gets back, I found, so there is something that is here in the Essence of the Heart Sutra by the Dalai Lama that when I get a chance, I want to share with everybody. And it's, so this is something that I know this is probably aggravating and driving you nuts because there's so much to try to, I mean,
Does
the
it does
words are
not
so difficult.
does not aggravate me? You mean what part aggravates me?
Me.
No,
Okay.
no,
Wait a minute.
no,
Can I
no.
get that? Will you put that in writing? So
It's-
the reason why this drives me nuts is because there are sometimes I just found it in that book what he says clearer than I can say, and it's about this idea of characteristics being with things. So is emptiness changing or unchanging?
Mhm.
Emptiness is unchanging. A lack doesn't change. You don't have any more lack of something and any less lack of something. Lack is lack. That doesn't change. However, the object to which it's applied, the emptiness of this bottle, when the bottle ceases, the emptiness doesn't then float off and become something else. And that's what His Holiness is saying very clearly here, that the emptiness that we're talking about is that emptiness of that bottle.
That
So-
specific emptiness.
Right. And so when the bottle ceases, the emptiness also ceases. So
Mhm.
because I know everyone thinks that I'm just a moron, I'm going to read when they get back what His Holiness said so I don't feel like an idiot. Although I'm not sure that that will change anything.
No worries, no worries. I do want to get a chance though. So your Pepsi bottle, your question, maybe is Geshe-la still with us or is he on
Yeah,
break? Is he
he's
here? Okay.
He's reading.
Okay. Perhaps, so I'm just looking for something, but perhaps we can ask your question now about if your bottle ceases to be.
Does the Dokpa continue after the bottle
Right,
is over?
right. So that's what I thought we could ask Geshe-la now while we're waiting for people. Geshe-la,
No.
okay. Ani, Pena, Marki, Ani Pepsi gi di, Ani mitakbare. Ani kale la ani gyorne dene shik drogiorwa.
Dere.
Dene ani meba chakne dokpa yang meba ani chagir rabe. Dokpa yang meba chak.
Kume chado doba chuje me thedo khud tabe chue kang me chadogwa. Benan Pepsi bodo me chadogala Pepsi dang tongi me chagwa. Ni taparwa.
Dene dokpa yang ani meba chagire.
Chagre.
Oh, so. Dene Pepsi bottle, Europe kapsu, Pepsi bottle ki dokpa yore.
Yore.
Yeah, okay.
Doba da zurdu jaye marta. Pepsi bodo le zurdu doba jaye zurdu yo mare. Pepsi bodo khran la thate do dobe thate main bichwe jila doba zadming tagare. Thate main bichwe. Pumbala thate dobe bichwe pumbe dobe singi. Chukanda kaina ngobo chukanda kaina teta thate dobe bichwe dela te do chudi doba zela bare. 다 유견에서는 딱봐도 미답에 개발돼 또 지기여바 잠재 말다 유견 유대 켈린 때는 뚜밍겐지나 다 미다파 니체 누스제 자야제 매 차송근데 에 그지긴지 비던데 말와 그 최신지 매 차이는 그 님도 매 차버와 pena pumpa zonde jinanda kawa zonde jinanda kawa de ngon jundu de gala kawe tangi doba dang kawe tangi dongni dang desukanga me charu ro kawe tangi sheja yorwa kawe keju sheja yorwa kawe keju gi tabe kawe tangi keju pe momborda desukanga kawe keju cha de yore
Ani laso dene pena ani chick gyone pena the Pepsi bottle la ani dokpa yore dela dokpa yore Pepsi bottle di chega chena dene
boba nang yuran dore
laso
yuran dore kar bezin bodol khona keji chejendal yura cha sonro tabe Pepsi bottle yoppa pusin bottle cheja desukanga takbare
oh goodness gracious okay there's I mean we could just yes splitting hairs and rabbit holes at the same time so the question was if the Pepsi bottle ceases to be does the dokpa or this self-isolate that distinguishes this specific phenomena in and of itself, does it go out of being too? Is it also no longer, does it also come out of being? And Geshe-la said, yes, it does. Soon as the Pepsi, so I said, the Pepsi bottle is changing. One day it will disintegrate and be gone. What happens to the dokpa? Well, the dokpa is gone too. So then I asked, what happens? So this Pepsi bottle has a particular dokpa right now. What happens if you cut the Pepsi bottle in half and it's different? And he said, then the dokpa changes as well.
So then you have two dokpa.
I don't know if the first dokpa still exists. I didn't ask that question.
Pepsi bottle gonna chago mara chega chago
Really?
Pepsi bottle zede kono Unchanging ming ro.
So, oh, sorry.
Dene, okay, lasso. Dene tampo di Pepsi bottle di tampo ani machengon la dokpa chekyore chene dokpa yangyor gire dene dokpa tangpe la ani kari chagire ani dokpa ni yore
dokpa ni zan tate Pepsi bottle khonang ngon jur sarwa re omara te dokpa Pepsi bottle chega de Pepsi bottle doba marwa chega doba marwa
okay lasso dene the dokpa tampo the whole Pepsi bottle mache Pepsi bottle digi dokpa yang yore
Pepsi bottle de jagore chega doba le chega jagore kanjang doba kanjang da jayarwa
Yana yang ngone ani tanda ani Pepsi bottle chick matok ani chega
Pepsi bottle lagi marwa chega Pepsi bottle lagi mukha marwa
okay So I so trying to get to the point where we have does that first Pepsi bottle dokpa still exist when we have only a second Pepsi bottle dokpa? Or do we have two or what? And he said, well, the second one really isn't a Pepsi bottle dokpa because it's only half a Pepsi bottle, right? It's not, so you definitely don't have two Pepsi bottle dokpas, but.
So basically what you're saying is I'm not the only one who's being a stickler about definitions here. So you see, with what you said with the first explanation, when you ask Geshe-la about if the Pepsi bottle ceases, does the dokpa continue? Now you're answering my question about the difference between the English usage of permanence and unchanging, because that pretty much says exactly what I said. The dokpa is not changing. But
it just goes out of being. No, he said the dokpa changes. Well, it changes when the Pepsi bottle changes.
But it goes out of being.
But then
while there's a Pepsi bottle that is changing, my Pepsi bottle is changing, it gets less and less as I tilt back.
Yeah.
The dokpa doesn't change.
That's right.
So that's the difference between the English words permanent and impermanent, changing and unchanging, as being subtly different.
Mhm.
So will you ask him real quick before I read this, does that same, what he's applying, what we're talking about with dokpa, seems to apply also to the principle of emptiness as with an object, with a form?
Okay, any like a material object.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
so the dokpa of the Pepsi
let's-
bottle.
Just give a. Okay, do you want to say the emptiness of the bottle? Should we keep it the same, or do you want to use? Okay.
Yeah, I think it
Oh.
would still work.
Okay. Dine Geshe-la dire. Ani Pepsi bottle de la yang ani tonpa ni ore. Penadi.
Remember me about the person but the Tombaniroa.
Lasso. Dine the tonpa ni di dine Pepsi bottle meba sorne ani jikne meba sorne yang ani tonpa ni de la kari chagire di yang ani meba chagi labesa.
차로 배는 마치나 마치 자등이 이상이 손님 가로라. 그 주진 가서로 주진 가는 주진은 말을 주진은 말을 중요한 가로요 말아.
So yes, the emptiness would go out of being.
So it's the same idea.
지들 손님을 지들 라고 말다 가로래.
Gagire,
주진
gagire.
가로.
Okay.
주진 간다 간 땡가도 주 동리도 배나 분비상계 동리대 분비 캐주로 와. 분배는 캐주배 망보여라. 분바 미다빠, 분바 뒤제, 분바 여빠, 분바 송이, 분바 다음에 봐. 두두스 자리나 분대서강 분배 캐주 차대요래. 캐지도 만들 캐주지 요 말이. 캐지도 만들 캐주 메드가라. 캐지도 like 견셔도 캐주 강가 라진이 매차로 와.
So all of the qualities, that bottle holds many different qualities, and we can, say that it is selfless, that it is empty, that it is impermanent. It holds many qualities. And when, that the basis upon which we're finding that emptiness and that impermanence and that lack of inherent existence, all of those features also cease. And so Geshe-la says the emptiness, we don't want to say the emptiness becomes nothing. What we want to say is the emptiness ceases. That emptiness ceases. So for example, he said, and this is, for any objective, anything objective. And so, for example, for himself, if he were to die, the emptiness, his own emptiness, his selflessness, that emptiness would cease to be. Just like the rest of the features of Geshe-la would cease to be, the emptiness of Geshe-la would also cease to be.
Okay, so is it all right if I read this? Then this is from the Dalai Lama, from the Essence of the Heart Sutra. And since we're, I think he does a really good job of making clear what you just said. He says, it's important to clarify that we're not speaking of emptiness as some kind of absolute stratum of reality, akin to, say, the ancient Indian concept of Brahman, which is conceived to be an underlying absolute reality from which the illusory world of multiplicity emerges. Emptiness is not a core reality lying somehow at the heart of the universe from which the diversity of phenomena arise. Emptiness can only be conceived of in relation to individual things and events. For example, when we speak of the emptiness of a form, we are talking of the ultimate reality of that form, the fact that it is devoid of intrinsic existence. That emptiness is the ultimate nature of that form. Emptiness exists only as a quality of a particular phenomena. Emptiness does not exist separately and independently of particular phenomena. Furthermore, since emptiness can only be understood as ultimate reality in relation to individual phenomena, individual things and events, when an individual phenomena ceases to exist, the emptiness of that phenomena will also cease to exist. So although emptiness is not itself the product of causes and conditions, when a basis for identifying emptiness no longer exists, the emptiness of that thing also ceases to exist.
Okay, yeah, that's just what Geshe-la just said now. He also pointed out, which I forgot to add, that once he ceases to exist, his, the dharmata, that underlying nature, his dharmata nature also ceases to exist.
Diana, to ask Geshe-la for me. Geshe-la, so at the beginning of the teaching, I believe that Geshe-la mentioned about self-knower. Okay, so now we're talking about, I think I understand what Mark just said, but how is it related back to the original subject of discussion?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Tanda ngaso kana the yul mebachana yang yul gidopa yang meba chagi yerpa dang nga tompani pena yul chik dene chuchengi tompani yang ani gakpa di rangrik dang dralwa yena yamena madralwa.
대단 대화체 그 용마라 그 가가를 찾더라 라리지디 셰바지 유레 셰바지 유에메까지 시거라 다 추진난 중인이 개주 찾더라 개지에는 배 개지든가 아니나 개지도 그 개지들은 유런도 그라 개지들은 아직 유런 로드셔거라 개지들 tabayimbe chayore mitabayimbe chayore.
La so dene drelwa shedra yomare. Rangrik la.
Edo mara. Rari sidugala sepachi yuljen to yul togyo bati kachi gorwa. Eda tunda ma sosogin duzul mandarwa. Yani thangyuete tenzawanyin kelingo marwa. Pagide manche keji giruando digala kejilen giruando de kejin doda tunda kanga thungiri bhajan rabore kanga.
So no, actually, what we're talking about now with objects, objective existence, whether it is changing or unchanging. We could also say momentary or not momentary or permanent or not permanent. We've been discussing the difference between these two, if something is under constant change or if it stays unchanging. We've been discussing those two different things. However, it's not connected to where we started with awareness knowing itself, self-knowing awareness, two different subjects. To be self-knowing, so we are talking about an object here, but what we're asking is, can awareness know itself? Can mind know itself? Can consciousness know itself? Can it take itself as an object? That's what we have been discussing. And so the lower tenet systems all, would do posit some level of this notion that awareness of self-awareness, whereas the Prasangika do not accept this whatsoever. They don't accept it, but they're two different subjects. Did that answer your question, Angela?
Yes, thank you.
야, 다 견들도 하다. 다 배나 계지는 계지 규정이 딱 최가다 가려네. 계지도 규정이 뭐지를 너바타대 인구래. 다들 녀자 처먹을 때 다들 배나 가르소래.
Pena, Kishla.
배나 zug당기 중이다 zu니 뭐지를 너바타대 많이 견지어래. 너바타대 뭐지를 너바타대 많이 견지. 너바타대 인라 뭐지 많이 견지 견게요래. 단다디 세랭잉보나라 zu tomba tomba니 zu lekan tomba니 제마인 tomba니 게 주제마인 저거도아 디게 가르는 동이 지고되게 기지의 교정이 뭐지 임바투 부아래 너바타데 임바투 부아래 근데 내가 전부 어디나라 제망아도 양대 연 나한테 이거 더서 지야다 가르잖아 독바당 오 타데 당오지 제데 인지티나 따다 메나 민고 코노르테 거와 코노르테나 야보민도 에 지거르 마다티 내가 또 전부 어디 들 동이 지거르는 거네 다 세랭잉베기 세랭잉베는 잉부 양이 어디니 시거래 내가 요래요다
Yeah, and so Geshe-la proceeds this section with, some measure of caution because he's saying that if the right English words are not used to translate this, there's really a very easy and great chance of either understanding erroneously, translating erroneously, to just misunderstand the meaning. And so it's very, very, tricky to do this. And so when we're talking about the qualities of something and whether it be a singular in essence or distinct in essence, there are actually, I think, 8 different ways to apply an assumption, and all 8 are wrong. And so if you think about it this way, then that's mistake, that it's the same is different, that they're different. That they're the same is wrong, that they're different is wrong, that they're not other than different is wrong. So you have to be very careful. So for example, in the Heart Sutra, where it says, form is empty and so forth. La dene sharing yupo nangla.
tomba니 zuzu zulekyan tomba니 제마인 tomba니 lekyan zu제마인 너 제드가라 동이 지거시거 되나라.
So for example, where
제드가 가르잖아 기지의 교정이 뭐지인라 너바타데 시거래. 뭐지인라 너바타데 마이나 견지어래. 너바타데 일라 뭐지 마이나 양 견지어래. 견제여대.
okay, so
내가 또 전부 쉬워야 되나라.
and
어디로 왔다 뭐지기 돈다데 뭐지 있어야 돼 간지 구구에 인지티나 가리메 너바지도 타데 해야 돼. 너왜 인지티도 따다지 나나가서 벽에나 라브나 인지 메이나 이야 너르니가 여러와 간제 계지의 계정이 답 주의 땅의 동인이 계지 쳐들어와 zuda zugu thang thongini kiji de yorwa kiji zu keje zugu thang thongni 들어와 koni ngoji 인구 와래 너바 타대 인구 와래 ngoji 마이나 너바 견시 너바 타대 마이나 견시
Ngoa chik,
Oh.
that's Gyokchar-san. Ngoa chik.
ngoji sidigala ngososo 마인 따대 싱이나 ngososo 마인 비쳐라 ngoji sidigala 제바데 미다방이 ngoji 인라고 와래 제바 시드가라 고 주장이 유행원기 뚱대긴지로와 제바다 미다바강가 유된 켈레 때문에 뚱긴지라 제발라고 유된 켈레 때문에 뚱긴지라 미다발고와 따디 시드 따다 메나 다 카보레
So, for example, when in the Heart Sutra it says form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Form is not other than emptiness, emptiness is not other than form. And so using these 4 lines of emptiness, we can look when something is the same essentially and yet individually distinct. So for example, in that first line, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. So essentially, they're the same. The sum of those 2 sentences shows that actually they're the same, and yet they're distinct because we're talking about form and we're talking about emptiness, which are both distinct things. And yet in that statement, we see that it's saying they're the same. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. And so essentially the same, individually distinct. So that's one term that's really important, that all of the words in that phrase, for example, are understood. Because otherwise, just to say that statement could be very confusing. Geshe-la went into a mixture of many other statements that I just kind of got lost on, that just would actually be inserting the wrong words in the wrong order, which would actually just be a big mistake. Then there would not be truth in that statement. And therefore, it's so important that these terms are translated exactly, or there can be very, very big misunderstandings. Dine dordu chene görsayin Geshe-la.
Los wada tendere de indugala ke chimodere da dobasya da ngosya da ji inminsya da ke chimodere de tananga zo sig tanyegel dang mal dang de ji tos khabuji do tere da diji de gala ta kanji tiring che de senjamba kerang rari khelna 좀된데 도숨당 갈도도 우제데 다 티니테 마던 로요 마르다 다시마 요하드나 라리 리빙 가야 돼 용거로 다 티링 룽근 가야 돼 티링 차르와 리빙 가야 돼 용거로 리빙 가야 되라 페인가 파다 뜬긴가 파다 니 우도 다 상이 페인가 파다 티링 로스잖아 다 로샤가
So,
다이 한 그래 다이
pega padang de lasso.
도인가 바니레
Ani dungak, ani sena,
도인기 다 도인
sena.
돈다 데 가고 다 도인기 가야
Okay. And So basically, what's been said here. So we have this like this isolate words such as this self, like this specific isolate, the essential, the is or is not, and it's really sometimes when we read sentences and in this philosophy, it just takes a while to keep reading, to break it down. What's being asserted, what's being negated, what is the essential versus what is the distinct appearance. And so it's really important to kind of slow down, understand those words, look at them, and really try to understand underlying what's being said about, in that particular statement. And so moving on from there, again, we have just finished the refutation by the Prasangika to the mind only that they're based on the words of the Buddha himself, that their philosophy is flawed, is incorrect, is flawed, and those three scriptural supports were given. I put two of those up already this past week, and I'll put the third one Geshe-la sent me today. I'll put that up too. Those are the three that came actually from the commentary that Geshe-la is reading from right now. And so now we're done with the scriptural refutation, and now we move into the logical refutation, refuting from logic. And then there's two sections here where examples, they will use illustrations, negate via illustrations or examples, and then negate the meaning via meaning. And so that's what we will come upon next. And maybe just in the way of the Bodhisattva, the last verse, when we talked about the sword, let's just see.
Diane,
So Geshe-la,
I'm sorry. Just before I forget, when you send out the information later on, can you be so kind to send out how the word dopa is written in Tibetan as well? Okay, thanks.
Sure, I can add that. Yep.
Thank you so much.
Yep. So the last two from the root text were verses number 16 and 17. And to add some context to what Geshe-la has been giving commentary on, I will go back and read 16 and 17. But if for you these same illusions have no being, what indeed is there to be? 17 and 18. But if the mirage is the mind itself, what is then perceived by what? The guardian of the world himself has said that mind cannot be seen by mind. And 18, in just the same way he has said the sword's edge cannot cut the sword, but you say it's like the flame that perfectly illuminates itself. And so that's the point we are in the actual root text, chapter 9, verses 18.
다 뒤서다 시라민도 다 karma 뒤서다 시라민 가르사 단다 주정 나단 제가 요서도 나다 karma 유지 찾아서.
Yeah.
Thank you.
La sola. So Geshe-la saying we're pretty much out of time at this point. La Geshe-la.
당 가서 빼들라 말면 빼다 셀기 빼지는 이자예요. 그런데 빼자야 돼도 리비 땡긴가 가서 리비 가야 돼서 저마다 셔는 말해. 이런 살사 말해.
La so. Right.
아니 빼절로
Okay.
더서
So the next, so now we have this refutation through logic, again through examples is the first one that will come up. And so we kind of alluded here at the end of this verse number 18, where we spoke about both the sword's edge and the flame, like a butter lamp illuminating itself. And we would not be able to finish those and really do them justice if we tried to start those today, as we're almost out of time. So it makes more sense to leave those for next week, whether that flame can illuminate itself or the crystal can illuminate itself, for example. Those will be coming up next week. So we'll kind of stop the text here.
그래도 뒤와 단어도 안 썼지.
Yeah, but maybe there's time for a question or so.
Okay, I'll ask a question if nobody else
Okay.
wants to.
Okay, go ahead.
Yep. So my question is, we talk about consciousness. Can consciousness exist without form? Can consciousness exist without a body? Like my consciousness, can it exist without my body to support it? Do you know what I'm
I do.
trying to ask?
Ani shepa sena zuki zimpa shepa zukla zimpa shepa di ngala zuk mena pena pumpo nga mena pumpo mena ani shepa pumpo mepe shepa tsigi orpe zuk mepe shepa.
그 감숨라 섬당에 가가래. 너 감이나 너 땡기 간사게 풍부단데나 풍부든 너감 너비 주분단데니 시바지하고와. 풍부다다 시바데 그 풍부데 시바레다 랍고 말데 그 코니 땐데 마차디어와. 다 줌에 감나이나 주 요마와. 주기 풍부 요마레 시 서로 풍부 열어와. 시바르와. 서로 풍부 니시게 풍부 열에. 풍부 지레. 가자게 생이 자야 되라. 풍부 지암 알아 따때 지암 알아 시기도와.
Dine sorwa dang duche
디제
dang shepa.
서로 풍부 니시게 풍부 남버 10 풍부
Number
지열에.
shepa.
주멜라.
Yaso.
다 주캄당 너캄니라 풍부 알아 따고라. 내가 주기 풍부다 제네. 다 가자게 생이라 풍부 지암 알아 따ben가 시싱이도.
La yankir chikti
가자게
kamadela.
생이라 풍부
Gangsa.
풍부 지암 알아 따바스. 지 당근데 가래 주메기 텔라 지타. 풍부 지타 ben가. 주캄당 너캄니라 풍부 알아 따ben가. 가자 시디가라 땡디 지시가 오다.
Laso. Dine zukam dang dirkam la. Dine gangsa
ben가.
pongponga. Ani zukam.
딱 간사 다 봐라. 다 잠지르마도 디마소나 양가르 샤소나 간사 차구마라. 디 주기 본부 서로 본부 디지기 뭐 넘버 10 본부가 초 잠질라 간사 즈nga 다 잠지르다.
So we make a distinction between the different realms. So there is the form realm, the desire realm, the form realm, and the formless realm. And so beings in the desire realm, so beings like us, have this aggregate body, a body of 5 aggregates, one of the aggregates being the consciousness. So in this realm, then yes, form is a requisite, or we could say is the basis upon which we have this consciousness. So there is form. However, in the formless realm, there is no form. It's called the formless realm. So of the 5 aggregates, form is missing. So, however, there is consciousness. And so there is feelings and karmic, so there is feelings and perception and karmic connection and consciousness. So there is no form, and yet there is consciousness. So that's in the formless realm. In the form realm, once again, in the form realm, there would be form and consciousness together. So there would be all 5. But in the formless realm, that's not the case. When we speak about an individual, actually, the definition, when we define the word individual, so in the Buddhist philosophical context, that which is called an individual is one that has a consciousness as well as the 4 other aggregates. And so it is this consciousness upon and together with the other aggregates, so that define the individual. But not only that, we ourselves apply this thought of I, me, onto this aggregate body. That's what we call the I, me, is very related to this form. So in this realm, in the desire realm, yes, there would be form associated. However, there can be consciousness without form in the formless realms.
Okay, so then their consciousness can exist without form. So would that be an example of, and this correlation may be way off, but mind only? You don't have a body, you have mind only. You only have consciousness only of mind.
When you ask that, can I add something real quick to what he's asking? My understanding of the formless realm is that beings that are in the formless realm are absorbed in concentration such that they don't produce a form skandha. So mind only is a philosophy for humans. The form realm, as far as I am aware, is a realm in which the beings there are absorbed in a samadhi that is unwavering, such that it doesn't produce a body. If you can clarify that, Diane.
Go ahead, Steve.
Well, let me ask the question in another way then. So if you have consciousness that exists without form, would that be, last week, Laura asked a question of Geshe-la, and Geshe-la said, I don't want to get it wrong, I think Laura said if 2 people, if their minds became undefiled, and they had no defilements in them, and essentially, which would mean they would be enlightened, I believe, if they're undefiled. Geshe-la said their minds would be the same. So if so, an undefiled consciousness, if they're the same, so is all consciousness that it becomes undefiled, there is just one consciousness. Is that making any sense?
Sure, I'll get Geshe-la to speak on it.
It's kind of okay.
It's not a like distinct question, but perhaps I'll get him to speak on the subject.
Well, let me try and just, I'm having trouble expressing what I'm trying to say. If an undefiled mind is the same, so we all have consciousness, but our minds are defiled. So if we were to clear all of our defilements, our consciousnesses would be the same. So
Okay. Mm-hmm.
if they're all the same, that means that there's only one consciousness, ultimately one undefiled consciousness that exists. That's where I'm going with that.
Mm-hmm. Kong la ani triwa ni yores ani chik dire pena zuk mepe ki kam dela ani nampar shepa yore te zu yomare dela ani sem sampa dang drabo chik ani yena kangyen sena sem sampa gi dukte nala ani konso yang ani pena zu yomare yena yang sem yore yena dela de nila ani zuk mepegi namshi pena zu mekamla dang sem sampegi drupte del ani lukla ani drelwa yena di chikche
sensambe harza ta zoom kamla zoom ada tukda jiga chikbarwa tukda jiga ndogara zoom kamla zoom ada ming khora zoom kamla gorwa sensambe zoom kamla zoom ada sensambe ndogo uma ben dogara ndode ben dogara chikpare
las yenayang okay ani nga sem sampa gi ani drupta gi ani derpa yena ani nga sem sampa yena nga zume kam yempa yang kapki yomarwa
teda ingu marwa
hola so di culture
sensambe te zoom kamla zoom ada sensambe ndogare ani
nga rang ani nga sem sampa gi drupta ki dergiore nga dergiye yenayang dela dergi yenayang zumepe ani sem sampa yenayang nga rang ta nga rang zume kamla yore de yore tanda nga zume kamla de yore
zoom kamba imbar gube senzamba teda hago masonda
okay tanda ani nga sem sampa yempa charna oh
senzamba zedagala chide mindeji jama dendu ndogin jela senzamba la gorwa
laso dine nga dela
senzamba singende kelenji gerwa kelenji gani kelen
nga sem sampa gi kelen na nga yang deme kam ani gangzak yempa chagi yena kongi chiwadere
teda hago mason senzamba imbar gube zoom kamba yeme kajishi gorda kanje teda hago masonda senzamba imbar gube zoom kamba yela gona mela gona tashe
kongi chiwadere ani keba kari yore ani zume kamla ani zu yomare sem sampa gi dolukla ani zuyomare.
Sensame lulu zu me kwain. Sensame lulu zu yora. Sensame lulu zu
Oh, re,
me
re, re.
kamara.
Oh, re, re. Kongi triwa that's kensare konda.
No, te mare.
Okay. Dine triwa shandak dire ani dine kasang lorgi kandre shia chick kandre chick shoe songs pena mi ni sangena konigi sem chick parape kakare ani kerangi len gyape kapsu dine kongi sam dine trima mere sam di chikpare kaka yomare chikpare
Ta phan lidiga ishi chukungol ro chakwara.
re re re
Redere.
dine ngone
Sena.
re re dine
Oh.
ngone chena sam chikmatok ani dine sangegi sam dine yeshe chuku di chikmato ani yosamare kongi triwa
Sangi
dire
sala. Teri gawaringa la.
Sem chikmato yomare. Trime mepe sem.
Ta dusi chidor chena tima me besem mata. Sangi sana tima me besem mata. Dichi sem gini yomara. Terwa.
Dine sem chikpare. Dine
Sem
sange.
chiran chire zede labu yomara. Sem ta tima me besem chi. Dichi de time nis chene. Time sem chi pore isi. Sangi sana sangi kazo yara. Sangi ishi chuku kazo yara. Nga tanga kyab tukure. Terwa.
Chik yorepe ani tade yorepe or mampo yore.
ता 만타 야와 링잉을 상게 고다 링아 가루지 고라 야와 링아다 만타 도와 테 지리망 도와
Lasso. Di sem chik le manga yang yore.
요리야 데 야와 링아 이싱아데 냉규니 야와 링아 차거와
Okay, so
디제데 디메니 니스체네 디메세 마다요 마라 디제데 디메 키바이나 디제 셈달라 셈나카 마부로스 미 간자 레레 셈 레리어와
So we can say that if we're talking about mind, when there's a defiled mind and an undefiled mind, there's only one thing called undefiled mind. There are not different kinds of undefiled mind. However, as each person has a mind stream, then there are many minds. So the primordial wisdom dharmakaya of that mind is one and the same, but the minds themselves are myriad. There are multiple. If we just think about, all of the Buddhas of the 5 conqueror families and so forth, there are many, there are multiple. So it is incorrect to say there is only one mind, but it is correct to say that enlightened mind of one being is the same as the enlightened mind of another being is the same. So they possess the same quality. And as for whether being a mind, if the mind only philosophy is the same as being like in the same like situation as those in the formless realms, well, it's not, we can't, it's not a good correlation, because mind, there's no form in the formless realm. However, mind only tenet system do accept and posit existence of the phenomenal things of form. So that they actually are like, existentialists. They do. So no, they would not be the same, because in the mind only, to them, there is some level of existence or establishment in that form.
Okay, I thought that the mind only said that there was no thing other than the mind, that mind only, right? There was no form. I thought that it was established. Geshe-la said that there was that mind only has no form, right? Didn't we say that?
Dine geshe
Norgu
yine
orta.
di sem sampa ni
Samba
zuyo.
Sidigala Zoo me the cargo marda. Zoo Senzamelu Zoo Menandiku Marwa. Zoo Chirulton do your Marla Maro, the Simgi Zoo thing a Simgi Dangi to in Labora.
So it's not, we can't go all the way to say they don't accept form whatsoever. What they don't accept is forms outside that are external, that these forms and objects are something that is occurring mentally, not external from oneself, but mentally. So they don't deny forms. They deny that they exist ultimately externally.
Senzamelu Samba Sidigalas my engine of mine one lilagora. One tigi Chukanga Chay Natabe Semaimba Kampa that this is Kanga Yomarze Senza Belegu Marva. Chigmi dote. That Chirultundu. Mazu Nangan Topin Nangtu Najinji, Yomara or Topin Nantu Chirultundu Yobanangora. Tope Jinji Chirultun Topakepe Children Yubazan in Nangorwa. They know Chirultundu me lagor. Children to Tundaginji 10,000 in me. Nang Shibi Dangi Shibi Pacha Seltu Blutundaba. Then this is in the war. Kanji Zoo Tanta Chu Yuzete. Chesa Shibi Dangi in some manually Sewa that Nijua. Semgi Pacha Seltu Blutuba in some Chipula Sharamada. Some Chipumada, some Jenta Mez, Chujenta Mez, Labu Marta. He called it Norgore, Qua the Pet Norgore.
It's very misleading in English, this term mind only, because what it leads one to think is that outside of mind, there's nothing else, that there's only mind and there's nothing else. And to leave it at that understanding is mistaken. What what proponents of mind only do say is that we perceive objects as if they are out there, over there, external to us. And they say that it's not like that, but rather these are objects of consciousness itself, that the karmic imprints are firing and are engaging, and therefore we perceive those objects, but that they are not external to us. So to think that there's nothing but mind is a big mistake, Geshe-la said.
Well, I mean, that's why I asked the question to begin with. If there's a consciousness that's formless, isn't that just simply mind? Consciousness without form is just mind, right?
Dindre yana ani samsampegi drupte lukdela dinengone chirola zu yomare shepa chik yore penadi bakchak selya dine shepa la ani sharia di yang ani di zukmepe di shepa di zume kam nangshin di zukmepe kam nangshin.
Then Marita, Zoo Yone Pacha Silchigi Pacha singing the Shiparela or mother. Pacha Sil Kanji Zoo that is Yoreda, you found the Churul to Mela Gori. Mazunang Najinji or Marela.
Mhm.
The mother zoom in it, sends them a little zoom in and dig me the.
So they don't say there are no forms in mind only. They don't say there are no forms, like anything coagulated to see, no form to perceive. They're not saying there's nothing to perceive, nothing formed that's perceived. What they're saying is that which is perceived to hold form is perceived inside mentally. They're not external, but it's not negating, it's not saying there is no form to be perceived.
Okay. It seems to me if you're perceiving something internally, which then you're not, then it's only of the mind. If that's just
Dine di nangi chele chik bo yimpa de, ani dine zukme kam dang drabo ani kari yore. Di nangi chele.
Nangi Chelezana?
Nangi chele pena ani sem bakchaki selya.
Oh,
Dine ngone pena chokse yuna di chokse di chirola yon mare di samsampe
Pacha
gi
Seto to be Relagora.
re di nangi gi chele re di chirola dine ngone zuk yomare di sem chikpo re ani zuk yomare nangjen re.
The Titiri Koguino to Quad Norgor, the Mare, Ingu Tetene Mare. Should Shirul Tapa Zu Top is Genji Matulagore, Genji, Nazunanga Jinji, Nikasanji Pale Limba, Gen Top and Nazuna Gio Marcia, the Sanzamel of Gorde, Tangu Lagora, Tangu Nazunanguna Jimeade, Karzana. Yurun Sutu to Tuanagio Marella Gores,
Re.
Sutu to Tuanangore. Senzambe Mazunang and the Pani Yondegan, Chidundi, Chironi Yondegan, Nangorde, Chirutun Nangorde, Tenajinio Mares. And but Chetam de Semgi Dani, Semgi Pacha, settled to some razor Lagores. Kanjinang Najio Mares, Senzabata Tango and Niga, and Double Lagorde, Tontate. Pe Kakachagore, singing Kazanji, Pet Tumnelaimba. Did not go over it, then not pesard.
Pelchia kongi triwa dire semgi bakchak selya din sem
Semgi Pacha Celerida, Sem Chipoy on the Zubun Mavas go to Goarwa. Zoom or Nante, Nazo Tonga Kanga Zoom Musum and Yugoarwa. Senza Maten is Musum Yongi da Marda.
Okay, di surpodo yana and kongi tree right now young ani hako song. Di semsampe gi dolukla ani dene chirola dundu yomare. Semgi bakchak selya
Selvi Nang race.
Selwe tokpe nangiore. Yana yang di yang ani pena mepa nangshenre. Di ngone yomare di
Chagomare. The Mabana Jinja, Zumela Zugun Yomarwa. This Zu Yore, the Yosan the Kakar is the Lagorwa.
Dene kongi dela lapne kongi dene di ngone di nangla chikpo yore di semgi chelere semgi chele chikpo yena zugme kam nangshen yingere. Okay, so establishing two things that Prasangika are saying. Things we perceive things, but the way we are mistaken about what we're perceiving. We perceive them as if they're exactly that, arising like just that thing, intrinsically holding its thatness, and it's not like that. So Prasangika do not deny objects, but they do assert that that which we see is not the way it looks. It's not the way it appears to be. Whereas mind only is, it's not how it appears to be in the way that it looks like it's outside of us. But it's an internal process, that this is something, again, that imprints of the mind kind of come alive or are awakened or fire or light up, and suddenly, it's, we see a reflection of that. We see that. But this is not the same, Geshe-la is saying, is that there's no form at all. That's not the same as saying they don't exist at all. And mind only doesn't exist, say that it doesn't exist at all either. Pelcha di ani pentogere Geshe-la zungyan pena melong nangla ani dene chik sharna pena zung ani melong chikla ani zuk chik sharna di zugnian di zuk rang sigi orabe zuk sigi orabe
melona la
zugnian sharna
te jijin lag re jijin gi zungyen lag ro atela jijin gi zungyen dabo shar go ro
laso zuk ani sigi pena di semgi ani bakchak selya nangshin ani pechik roa samsamla di nangshin re ani selgi ore pena zugnian melong la gangla sharia de yang samsampe gi ani semgi bakchak selya nangshin re samsam di yang pe de yang ani lapki yona pena ngone zu yomare melong nangla zu yomare ngone zu yomare te ani
man tanda senza melula zu mesel lagu amara
re
mesel lagu amar senza me zu senza me lagu jamala zu shepal demin de sunga jamarwa yosale ta mandaji shepara mato.
Okay. Yeah, Geshe-la is leaving it, really leaving it at that it's not the same as saying that there is nothing there. It's just that it's not out there. So I was trying to give an example to ask if mind only would consider the reflection of that's in a mirror, would they consider it a form? But
shepa chibusun rabarji do pokali gyona otigi nor sen pobe sensamba lagora sensamba lagora
yeah
that engineer the my only so the sem chipos in koguda sem chipu ma jinda yo mare sonde te ko do
yeah. So the other thing Geshe-la is pointing out, which is important, and we take it back to the original, we take it back to Tibetan. So in English, it's called mind only. So mind is sem, only is chikpo. So it would be sem chikpo, mind only. But actually, that's not the terminology. It's sem sampa, not sampo. There's no only. Actually, in the Tibetan, there's no only in the term. It's so pa, so some pa is just nominalized. Yeah, it nominalizes it into one who, or one that, someone that. So it's that someone that holds it all to, holds it to the mind, for example. It's not only
다니도 마와 생긴데 고고 그런 건 있잖아. 최담제 semgi 다니도 마와. semgi 다 제법으로 이제 semgi 최담제 semgi 다니도 마와 생기 되고 그런 건 있잖아. senza 바지디가라.
Chutamche
semgi 다니도 마와.
So actually the full form of Samsampa, and I'll just let you know so you can you know that it's kind of this sentence. Samsampa has been shortened down to Chutamche Semgi Daknidu Mawa. And what that means is a proponent of that all phenomena Chutamche Sem are Semgi Dagni are of mind's nature itself. And so a proponent of that all phenomena are of mind's very nature itself.
Okay, I'll
다인도 다 두다 karma chonga sondo.
La sola, Geshe-la. Okay, well, maybe we leave it there for tonight, and if
Thank
I
you.
can help next week, we'll,
미강가 탕체나 야보 말해.
so maybe we'll finish here for tonight because it's already about 6:15.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
Geshe-la doesn't want everyone to be wiped out after this.
야, 가리라 장주 semjo rimboche 마게 바나긴 겨와냠바 메바에 코네 콘도 배워서 가리라에 코르 텐나데와 말린 중에네 제레지온 텐진 자베시데 바도 땡겨루지 잠발바에 칠터 캠바도 콘도 삼포테야 대다 군게지도 달럽지 겨와안디다 탐제 럽동 뜻음셰비 겨와탄 간라 초동아 바나 다젠가베 싸완데 zambochuche waragi.
Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. In the land encircled by snow-white mountains, the source of all happiness and benefit flows in your person, Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso. Remain until samsara ends. Just as the Bodhisattva Manjushri attained omniscience and Samantabhadra too, so now I dedicate these merits to train and follow in their footsteps. As all the victorious Buddhas of the past, present, and future praise dedication as supreme, so now I too dedicate these sources of my merit for all beings to perfect good actions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Geshe-la.
Diane. Thank you.
Of course, my pleasure. Okay, good to see everyone.
Thank you.
Teacher
Good night,
Nong.
Geshe-la.
Teacher.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.